So when my wife and I were creating our Mandalorian Merc costume, in an effort to get things done quickly, we created pistols for our primary weapons. She made two of them, or I made two of them for her, and I had one. We made the holsters and stuff like that. I knew down the road I was going to make a two-hand weapon of some sort. She wasn't sure whether or not she wanted a two-hand, or she liked the idea of being able to holster her pistols and not have anything in her hands. After we'd been trooping for a few years, she decided that she wanted a two-hand. Before she made that decision, I actually made this. It is a scaled version of the EE3 carbine that Boba Fett carries. This thing is a combination of thick-walled aluminum and solid aluminum. The cooling fins on the barrel are all solid aluminum. The stock and foregrip are all solid oak. This thing weighs not quite 7 pounds. She didn't want anything quite that heavy. So I carried that for a little while, and then she finally decided that she did in fact want something to carry two-hander. She had a couple of criteria. One, it needed to be lightweight. Two, it needed to be two-hander. And three, it needed to be compact. This is what I've created her. It meets one of those three criteria. It's a two-hander. It's certainly not compact. It is, well, I guess it could be considered lightweight. It ended up being a little heavier than we were hoping it was going to be. It weighs in at a little bit over 4 pounds. It is a slightly scaled down version of the t-7 ion disruptor from Star Wars Rebels. The stock collapses in the fully collapsed position. It is 37 inches from tip to tail. The stock will extend out so that it is 46 inches total. It is almost all PVC except for the two pieces that connect the top tube and the grip. Everything else on this thing is PVC. The video is broken down into I think 4 or 5 different pieces. The top tube, then the shroud and the flash suppressor. If it was a regular rifle, I guess it would be. The main body, and then the grip and stock parts. It's a long video, so if you want to skip around, if you're looking for information on one particular part, you can do that. I've tried to label them as best I can. Anyways, if you're trying to create your own, or if you're just interested, hope you enjoy the video, and good luck. Let's see what you guys are making. So the top tube is 1/2-inch thin-walled CPVC, 24-inch piece, and then two sections of 1/2-inch Schedule 40 that I basically heated up with a torch and tapped over top of the 1/2-inch CPVC. Capped those off with just the end caps that you pick up in Lowe's little thing. 2 1-inch pieces of aluminum that I drilled holes in so that the pipe would fit through. Rounded the edges, welded them closed, and then bonded them to the rings that I put around the main tube with a top. The main body of the gun is comprised primarily of 2 different sections of tubing. The bottom tube is 3/4-inch Schedule 40, and the main tube is 1.25-inch PVC. It's a real thin-walled stuff, pretty flimsy, but it kept it lightweight. I used just bizarre combination of fittings that I had to chop up and grind the insides out of so that I could stack them to get the effect that I wanted. For the front and rear, I'm going to call them shrouds, where the 2 pipes join. There's one behind the foregrip and one right behind the flash suppressor.
So I tried something new this time, and I used Gorilla Glue, Gorilla Adhesive, and I've never actually used this stuff before. I picked it up for something else, and I don't remember what I used it for. But it's basically how I bonded the modified fittings to the bottom tube so that the two tubes connected. So far, it's holding pretty well. It's been together like that for a week or so, and I've dropped it a couple of times and been pretty rough with it and hasn't fallen apart yet, so I'm hopeful that it continues to hold. I used fittings, basically couplers, 3/4 inch couplers and 1 1/4 inch couplers that I had left over to make the rings that I was going to glue together, and then I was going to glue the top tube brackets. Those are the aluminum squares. And so that's basically what I did, was I created these little rings so that I could snap them on over the tubes, and I didn't have to take the whole thing apart again once I got started. And basically just cut the tubes down to size, reamed out the inside so that they'd snap over, and that made them pretty easy to deal with. So the Shroud and Flash Suppressor are both made out of 2-inch Schedule 40 pipe. I basically cut the piece to length according to what I wanted. I think it was 12 inches for the Shroud and 6 for the Flash Suppressor. Cut it to section on the bandsaw, and then cut it down the length so that I could open it up when I heated it up. Once I had them both pieces cut, then what I did was I basically took a heat gun to it and just heated it until I got it in the shape that I wanted. Now, I'm going to make a note real quick. Depending on what you read on the internet or where you read, PVC emits all sorts of fumes. They can be everywhere from instantly fatal to toxic and potentially cancerous, depending on what you read and where. Don't set it on fire. That is actually really, really bad, and you'll ruin your project. But if you're going to heat PVC and sintra and that type of stuff up, you need to do it someplace with moving air or in a wide open area. Ideally would probably be a mask with some sort of filter or something like that. This stuff can be bad for you, so just don't carelessly be heating it up and breathing in, particularly indoors. Once I had the Shroud basically formed the way I wanted it to be and cut to the appropriate length, I basically just traced out the scallop section on both sides and then cut it out with a cutoff wheel. Went through later on, I'll go through and when I do the final sand, I'll clean up all of the edges and the cut marks and stuff like that. A Dremel would work well. This stuff actually cuts fairly easily with a hacksaw, one of the things that makes it really, really nice to work with. So I bonded the 2 other pieces of tubing on there. I forgot to make the video where I cut those. Drew a pattern that slightly resembled what the picture from Rebels had on it. It doesn't really, but it's close enough that that's what I wanted to use. Dremeled it out. When I was done dremeling, I took a file that I had broken the end off of and used the file to basically create a V-shaped pattern. It just removes the nasty chips and stuff like that from my poor dremeling skills. So as I mentioned before, the only 2 parts of this thing that are not made out of PVC pipe are the grip and the rod in the stock. For the grip, I took a section of thick wall aluminum tubing, milled out a rectangular area, welded a couple of 1-inch pieces of aluminum bar together to make the part your hand actually holds onto. Smashed it with those pieces with a hammer until they fit inside that aluminum tube. Cut the aluminum tube down widthwise so that it didn't go all the way around the body of the gun, and then welded the grip inside. I used aluminum because I wasn't sure I was going to be able to get something sturdy enough out of PVC. I was reasonably certain that an aluminum grip welded together would hold up to lots of troops and stuff like that. So essentially secured those with a nut-cert fastening gun. I think you see that later on in the video. So I cut a 4-inch piece of Schedule 40 down to 1.5 inches, heated it up a lot, and formed it into the oblong shape that I wanted. It took a little while. That's a lot of PVC, and that's a bunch of heat. But managed to do it without setting anything, including myself, on fire. Drilled a hole through the top section so that the rod that I'm going to use to couple that to the body can fit through there, and then basically superglued it. I did not have video footage. I did not take video footage of the sides of that, but I actually filled in those holes with a piece of PVC that I flattened out and then cut to shape so that they fit in there, and then basically superglued them in and used body filler to cover over it. So you've seen this piece before. I used one part in the front barrel of the gun at the muzzle and another part at the stock. I cut it in half, took a file, and filed down the inner fittings to about 45 degrees. I took a brass compression fitting out of a compression nut for plumbing and cut a notch out of the side. so that when I sandwiched the compression fitting between the two pieces of PVC that I had filed down, it squeezed that compression fitting where it was split around the aluminum rod that I used in the stock. And that's what keeps the stock in the locked or unlocked position. Tighten the nut down to lock it in and untighten it, loosen it to unlock it. So for the finishing, I threw a coat of body filler on the areas that were rough, and there were a couple areas that needed a little bit of filler. I've got a little bit more sanding to do before I can consider it done, but it's basically roughed in now, and my wife has already come up with a couple of ideas on what she wants to do to modify it, and so we'll get those in. Add some hardware store items that we found that will be neat to highlight some of the shrouds and stuff like that, and then it'll be good to go for the most part. Hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.